Shakespearean soil imaginaries creative encounters with climate emergencies. For the past year or so, I've kept two things on my desk, a copy of the Norton Shakespeare and a jar of soil. It's been said that it can take up to 1,000 years to produce just 2 to 3 centimetres of soil. Remarkably, the soil in my jar might have started to form when Shakespeare's texts were first produced. I'm also alarmed to learn how much soil could have been destroyed in the time it's taken to organise globe for globe. One example. A 2019 European Commission report by the Directorate General for Agriculture and Rural Development stated that in the EU we lose every year through water erosion alone the equivalent of a 1 metre depth soil on an area corresponding to the size of the city of Berlin. An increasing population which requires more land for food production, urbanisation and industries is putting our soil under additional pressure. Soil, Anglophone speakers' shorthand for this intricate, non-replenishable mix of vital stuff, is a small word for a fundamental part of planetary life, with timescales humans can only model and a composition humans can not easily see. Soil escapes our comprehension, and that makes it difficult to care about on a quotidian basis. Peter Warburn explains how, for us humans, soil is more obscure than water, both literally and metaphorically. Sure, there's a wealth of species and facts that have been discovered and that we can read about, but we know only a tiny fraction of what there is to know about the complex life that busies itself under our feet. That general obscurity doesn't help communicate soil precarity and its key place in the webbed relationships planetary health depends upon. In the words of Mary Kate McCoy, the United Nations has warned that 90% of the Earth's topsoil, where crops, forests, and will grow, could be degraded by 2050, in part due to intensive farming practices. Degraded soil not only stores less carbon, contributing to climate change, but it's also less drought tolerant, which in turn makes it more vulnerable to climate change. In 2017, Hilary Eklund's essay collection Groundwork, English Renaissance Literature and Soil Science, assembled a fabulous group of pre-modern scholars to discuss a range of Shakespearean works, Venus and Adonis, As You Like It, Hamlet, Henry IV, Parts 1 and 2, Henry V, Richard II and Richard III, and non-Shakespearean texts to argue via soil that decisions must be made about our environment and only humans can make them. The aim of my project, Shakespearean Soil Imaginaries, Creative Encounters with Climate Emergencies, is to develop the brilliant insights of these foregoing writers by asking, how can Shakespeare's cultural capital help the 21st century to see, locate and feel soil, and thus take urgent action to sustain its health? In the very brief talk that follows, I want to provide a sense of my response. Seeing soil. In Shakespeare on the Ecological Surface, I concluded that Richard II, Hamlet and Timon of Athens might be staged in repertory as Shakespeare's soilscape tragedies as a way of raising soil's profile today. Richard II and Hamlet interweave soily strands into their plots. Rather differently, Timon of Athens is based on blunt, elemental extremes. Matthew Salisbury's review of Simon Godwin's 2018 RSC production sums up the play's narrative arc well. It starts in gold and ends in soil. In its portrayal of the main character's descent from luxury to penury, from profligate Athenian to misanthropus, Timon of Athens is profoundly soil-centric. Timon's 41-line curse against Athens and its inhabitants, which envisions respiration as a kind of early modern biological warfare, breath, infect breath, shows a broad awareness of humanism's relationality. A few scenes later, stage directions tell us that Timon enters from his caves in the woods, half naked and with a spade. Still cursing, he demands that the earth yield him roots. He digs, he finds gold. In ecological terms, this episode shows how Timon's tragedy lies in his inability to respect the finely balanced environmental network he inhabits. It is not enough to order the damned earth, the common whore of mankind, to do its right nature. That Timon ends up in a grave within the beached verge of the salt flood in Act 5, Scene 2, line 101, that is wetlands instead of soil, It ultimately underscores the play's overarching interests in the damaging hierarchical interactions between humans and humus. Locating soil. When Henry IV in Henry IV Part 1 observed Sir Walter Blunt's travels from Holmdon in Northumberland to court have stained him with the variation of each soil, Shakespeare's king reminds us that soil changes according to its geographical location. A later play about another king allows us to consider soil's geomorphology. In the preface to the first book on cliff ecology, Douglas Larson, Uther Mathis, and Peter Kelly explain that we have given ourselves the assignment of trying to write a book about places everyone sees but no one knows. The exact area covered by them is not known because vertical surfaces do not show up on aerial photographs and maps. Cliffs represent some of the least disturbed habitats on Earth and contribute more to the biodiversity of a region than the actual surface coverage would indicate. As Paul Tom Edgar describes the sham cliff to Gloucester at 4/6/15 to 21, King Lear effectively alerts its audience to cliff ecology before the letter. To help bolster the make-believe moment's verisimilitude, Paul Tom Edgar adds some detail about the variety of organic life animating the supposed cliff face: crows, choughs, samphire, and one that gathers samphire. While this articulation of creaturely movement and scale ignores soil itself, inevitably soil's trace is inscribed in the play's famous invocation of rock samphire, and of course, Dover Cliff. Feeling soil. To be sure, drama has a communal reach which embraces page, stage, and theatre audience. In so doing, theatre makes soil human dynamics manifest. A book of Shakespeare's sonnets invariably evoke a more intimate relationship between poem and reader, and close reading might get a bit nearer the ecological response I'm looking for. That is, helping humans feel part of the soil and even to feel in general. Here's a bit of a soily fact from just last week. It was reported that Flinders University experts are exploring evidence that microbes in the soil and the environments around us can affect human microbiota and the gut-brain axis. So it seems then that soil science is catching up with kind of phenomenological approaches that we've been taking in literary studies for some time now. In her recent book, The Eco-Self in Early Modern English Literature, Elizabeth D. Gruber argues that, approached as an ecosystem, the sonnets predicate a new version of the self-world relationship. Gruber examines a quarter of the sonnets to suggest that the sonnets write the first chapter of the eco-self, ushering in a compelling, if precarious, mode of being in the world. To Gruber's provocative reading of some 40 poems, I add my own discussion of Sonnet 64. Through a specifically soil-focused lens, Sonnet 64 speaks to the relatively brief lifespan of human organisms. The anaphoric use of the temporal conjunction when I've seen to begin lines 1, 5, and 9 functions as the poem's key dialectic marker. Sonnet 64 tries to capture an eyewitness account of decay, how time's fell hand defaced the proud rich cost of outworn buried age. As in so many of the sonnets, Sonnet 64 speaks of humans' life frustrations, loss, and rotten remains. By contrast, more than human soil is not defeated, but altered in an interchange state. In the middle of Sonnet 64, the reader witnesses ocean and soil coexisting as wetlands, which have no need for humans. The sonneteer tells us, when I have seen the hungry ocean gain advantage on the kingdom of the shore, and the firm soil when of the water remain increasing store with loss, and loss with store. As Sonnet 64 makes clear, humans need both soil and water to flourish. So herewith then, I've tried to give you a glimpse of how my new project, Shakespearean Soil Imaginaries, might engender material affinities with Shakespeare's time, our own, and if we allow soil in our planet to thrive, those to come. Thank you for listening.